I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. On today's show, we're previewing the USMNT's upcoming friendlies against Belgium this Saturday, March 28th, and against Portugal on the following Tuesday. To help me do that, I've invited Larry Henry Jr. to join the show. Larry is the managing editor for SBI Soccer. Larry, so good to have you back. You're with me on the show through this entire March window. I have enjoyed your insights so far. Let's look ahead to these two friendlies against Belgium and Portugal. What's the biggest storyline you're watching out for these two friendlies involving USMNT?
Yeah, I think the big thing, Frank, that I'm looking at is I'm hoping to see a lot of polished soccer, and when I mean that, a lot of mistake-free soccer, a lot of energy in the squad. I mean, last year it was a busy year, right? A lot of matches, Gold Cup and international friendlies, and 2025. I think you could get away with some things, right? You're still kind of fine tuning everything as a squad. You're still working together, getting that chemistry going, for the long run. With not many matches left until the World Cup starts, I mean, you really want to see the best soccer from the U.S. So I think that's really what I'm going to be looking at, is just seeing if they can kind of rise to the challenge against two really good teams in Belgium and Portugal. They played some really good teams in 2025 and they picked up some good results, but I think these two teams are the next level, right? They're teams that have been talked about for a while. Obviously, I know there's some key players missing for both teams, but they're still both really good teams, and I think that it's really going to be a test for the U.S. to get results out of this window. But that's really what I'm going to be looking at, is just seeing if they can rise to the occasion. Obviously, we know last summer they played some European teams, right? Switzerland and Turkey, and they weren't able to get the job done against either of them. I remember Switzerland, they got hammered. So I'm hoping that they can, kind of rise to the occasion and take that next step as a squad.
Yeah. Coming off the big 5-1 win against Uruguay back in November, we got two other super high quality opponents, European opponents that you kind of alluded to it. This U.S. team historically has had a hard time beating European teams, and especially the European elite teams. So I definitely think that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, for me, the biggest storyline is that this is the last two friendlies we'll see before Mauricio Pochettino names his final roster, which is scheduled for May 26th. That's what they've announced that date for. So this is like last chance saloon for a lot of these players, on the bubble. There's players competing for, starting spots, but then there's players that, I don't know, probably 5, 6 players in this roster that are on the bubble of the World Cup roster. I'm curious to see, can one of those players do something with this opportunity to give themselves a clear advantage, of making that final World Cup roster? Can somebody really, step into the moment, take advantage of the moment and really catapult themselves? I'm thinking of guys like Joe Scally, Austin Trusty, Aiden Morris, Gio Reyna, Patrick Agyemang. These are guys that definitely have not booked their ticket, by any means, but can they have just an incredibly strong performance this window to really solidify their chances? Or the opposite, could there be a big screw up or something goes poorly and maybe you see it on their face on the field, like, oh man, I've really like blown my chance here. Certainly hope that doesn't happen for anybody, but that's the biggest storyline I think I'm looking out for. Do you think this is the toughest? You're saying you're looking for something polished from this team. You want to see something polished. Do you think Pochettino will experiment at all in these two friendlies?
Yeah, it's really tough to say. I mean, I feel like if they had another window, like a full window before that May roster comes out, we could definitely see some experimenting. I'm not sure that with minimal chances left, he's really going to experiment too much. It might be some fine tuning here and there, but ultimately, I imagine we're going to see kind of that same formation he's been using. A lot of the same guys that we've been seeing. I do see him going to the bench. I mean, I don't see a lot of these guys, playing maybe the full 90 minutes in both matches. I do see some rotation, I would say, between the two matches, just so everyone gets an opportunity. And, Pochettino obviously has to know too that, I mean, these guys got to go back and play a couple months of club football, whether it's abroad or in MLS. So, yeah, I think they're going to see maybe some minor adjustments, but I don't think anything too major. I don't think you're going to see him maybe change the entire formation to what he's been using, or using like a guy strictly out of position or anything like that. I think you're going to see maybe him stick with that, what he's been doing the tail end of 2025.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, with one match on a Saturday, one match on a Tuesday, that's only 2 days rest between the matches. And so it seems pretty unlikely he's going to roll out the same starting 11 more or less between those two matches. That, you would think there's going to be some rotation, especially with all of the kind of injury issues a lot of players on this team have had. Like I'm thinking of, Pulisic, I'm thinking of Anthony Robinson. I'd be surprised if Pochettino rolls both those guys out for 90 minutes, both matches. And so does he, that's going to make our next exercise, because the next thing we're going to roll into here is we're going to give you our starting 11 predictions. And that's going to make that a little bit challenging, because does he just go with his best 11 in the first match, against Belgium, and then go with a more rotated side against Portugal? Or does he try to split it up, kind of half and half, kind of a mixture between the two? We don't know, but we're going to do our best to predict it. They start off with Belgium this Saturday. Who's the starting 11 you think Mauricio Pochettino is gonna roll out there?
Yeah, I think he's gonna stick with what he's been doing, right? The three at the back. I think starting with in goalkeeper, I got Matt Freeze. I don't see that changing anytime soon, unless barring an injury or something like that, and hopefully none of that happens. But so I got Matt Freeze in net. The three at the back, I have Chris Richards, Tim Ream, and Joe Scally, with Scally being on that right side of the back three, something we've seen a little bit before. On the wing backs, left wing back, I got Anthony Robinson, and at right wing back, I got Timmy Weah. The two kind of holding midfielders, I'm going to go with Tanner Tessman and Aiden Morris, and then which will allow Weston McKennie to kind of move up higher into an attacking midfield position. So I'll have him and Christian Pulisic as kind of the number 10s, creating a lot of opportunities. And then Valérien Balogun will be the number 9. I don't see him giving up that job anytime soon. He's in really good form, scored in 4 straight coming into the window. So I like that's my starting 11 against Belgium. And back to your point, I do see him splitting it up over the 2 matches. I don't know if he's gonna. I find it hard for him to be going really tough the first match and then maybe rotating everybody for the second match. I think they're going to see a split with so many guys, like you said, like a Pulisic and a Jedi Robinson, who maybe need to monitor their fitness a little bit. Weston McKennie's played a lot this season, so I think you're going to see some rotation between the two. But I think you're going to see 2 really strong lineups for both matches.
Yeah, yeah, and he certainly has the players to do it, to heavily rotate and still throw out a top-notch squad. I mean, you look at the squad he put out against Uruguay and that 5-1 win. I mean, he won't like us using the term the not regulars, but that was a team that you wouldn't expect to be his best starting 11, that just went out there and shellacked Uruguay. So I agree with your starting 11 except for two spots. And it's funny, before the call, I was kind of jotting down what I thought the key decision points were, and it was the third center back, which is one of the ones I disagree with you on, or I guess I predicted differently. The central midfield, which is another one that I predicted differently. And then the right wing back, outside back, whatever we want to call that, depending on the formation, which you put Timmy Weah there. I put Timothy Weah there as well. So we didn't disagree on that. But these other two, I think, are the biggest. That's where the most uncertainty is in the starting lineup. That's where I'm going to be looking at most closely. You went with Joe Scally. I went with Miles Robinson. Okay. And I thought about Joe Scally was the next guy on my list. And I thought, Joe Scally, this might be his last chance. I mean, Serginho Dest is coming back into the roster for the final, World Cup roster, right? And so Joe Scally's position, I know he can play. It's not like he's a like for like with Serginho Dest, but we've seen him a lot on that right-sided, fullback role or whatsoever. So I'm just saying his spot's maybe at risk. He's right on the bubble. We've seen him miss out on some camps with Pochettino. So I thought, well, maybe Pochettino will give him a run. 90 minutes. All right, Joe, show me what you can do. And let's see if you can earn your World Cup roster spot. I think that's what I would do, but I ultimately just went with Miles Robinson because I just think Pochettino seems to have been giving him more chances than some of these other guys. I also thought about Alex Freeman, but I just thought because he's not playing very much at Villarreal that I'm like, okay, I don't know if he's going to be able to start this match and expected to go a lot of minutes. So I thought about him too. So I went with Miles Robinson there. And then where you had Aiden Morris as one of your central midfielders, I went with Johnny Cardoso. And I went with, okay, again, kind of like, I guess what I was explaining about Joe Scally, and I didn't go with him. This is what I'm feeling for Johnny Cardoso. It's like, okay, this guy, we've given him chance after chance in the U.S. men's national team, uniform, and he just really hasn't shown out yet. But he plays at one of the top clubs in the world. He's playing unbelievably. Let's bring him into camp. And you know what? If we're going to evaluate the guy, throw him out there in a starting spot and see what he can do. I just think he's going to get a start in one of these matches to see what he can do because I think he's one of the core players that Pochettino is really trying to figure out. Am I going to bring him on the roster or not? You know what I mean? He was at Madrid watching Atletico Madrid. What was it, last weekend or 2 weekends ago, watching him. So I think kind of like they gave Gio Reyna a chance in the November window to start to kind of get a good look at him. I think they're going to roll out Johnny Cardoso. But Aiden Morris, I mean, if it ends up being Aiden Morris, wouldn't surprise me at all because he's given Aiden Morris lots of minutes as well. Tell me a little bit more about why did you go with Joe Scally over some guys like Miles Robinson, Alex Freeman, Austin Trusty, who you've always kind of been a big proponent of? Why'd you go with Joe Scally there?
Yeah, I mean, I know that Scally has played that role in the past, whether it's with the national team or with Gladbach. It seems like Poch is sometimes he's a big fan of that, having a right back play as that right-sided center back, and then also having another right back option at up the field. I know when I was at the Paraguay match, he did that with Scally and Serginho Dest. I think you could easily do that too with Alex Freeman, although I don't, kind of similar to you, your thoughts on it is Freeman hasn't been playing all that much at club level, so I'm not sure if he's going to get a start in either match or if it's going to be off the bench for him. Trusty is interesting. I feel like Trusty, we've seen a little bit, I've seen him in the past. He's kind of been on the left side of the formation. So, I mean, unless he, ends up on the left side of the three-back system, I'm not sure he would maybe fit on the right side. But again, I mean, I know Poch wants to get a look at everybody in every kind of situation. And then two, Miles Robinson I think makes sense if you want to play the three full center backs and having three actual natural center backs there with him, Ream, and Richards. So that's an option as well. So I don't know. It's tough to say. I'm going a little off familiarity just with what we've seen in the past. If Serginho Dest was in this camp, maybe we're looking to look things a little differently, and where Timmy Weah goes, or where Serginho Dest goes, or if Joe Scally even, potentially starts a match. But I'm curious to see how it goes. Pochettino definitely has a lot of options he can choose from.
And Poch, he's kind of notorious for always throwing us a curveball. We all think he's going to do something, and then he just kind of completely throws something else out there. If you had to predict one just kind of wild curveball he might throw at us with this starting 11, well, give me something not crazy, but just some kind of curveball that none of us would expect that you think Poch might do. What would you say?
That's tough. I could potentially see. I know. I mean, maybe it's not much of a shock. I could maybe see Max Arfston getting a start over Anthony Robinson in one of these matches, just for the fact that Anthony Robinson. I think he's very vulnerable right now. He hasn't played particularly tons for Fulham in the new year. I know he's been kind of in and out of the starting lineup, and most recently he played, but he came off after the hour mark over the weekend. So, and Arfston, I thought, did a really good job in 2025 filling in for Robinson, who wasn't in the squad at all. So I could see that potentially being an option from Pochettino. But I do think Robinson will get minutes. I think it's important for him to get minutes again with the national team. I don't see him not playing at all. So, yeah, again, maybe not a crazy curveball, but I think when people ultimately see Anthony Robinson's name, they imagine he'll be penciled in as the starter. And I don't think that's really the case right now, just given his fitness issues in the past and his injury issues. And, they want to probably keep him 100% ready to go for the World Cup. And if that means keeping him out of the starting lineup for both matches, then so be it.
Yeah, I mean, Max Arfston's one of the players that's gotten the most starts, the most minutes of any player since Pochettino's taken over, as coach. And so, yeah, I didn't think about that. That could be surprising. He rolls him out there. The one I'm going to go with is Gio Reyna. I mean, none of us thought Gio Reyna was going to be in the starting lineup back in November. For their first match. What was that against Paraguay? And then he came out and he scored the first goal. I mean, does he just say, you know what, Gio, I'm going to throw you out there again to see what you can do to try and get you some confidence going back to your club? And that would be like the biggest curveball I think he could throw out there, for me. But that would be really interesting. That would be real interesting. I mean, I think Gio Reyna's going to get his chance at some point, but and he might even get a start, maybe in the second game. But that would be kind of a real big curveball that I could see Poch doing, is just putting him out there for this first match with the best 11, and seeing how he does. Okay, so we've talked about how this is the last chance saloon for a lot of players, a lot of positions. There's so many players that have so much that they could gain or lose from this window. I mean, who's the player you think has the most on the line this window?
Yeah, so I kind of broke it up into two sections. I'll quickly give you a player most to gain and most, to lose. So looking at the most to lose, and as much as probably people would think I'm crazy for saying this, I think Ricardo Pepi is in that list. And the reason why is he hasn't obviously played a ton because he's been injured. He's only really come back into the squad at PSV. Obviously, he had that recent, report linking him to Fulham for a summer move, and then that kind of falls apart due to some kind of details in the agreement between PSV and Fulham. So now kind of his future is up in the air again. And with, Haji Wright, I don't think you can rule Haji Wright out of the World Cup just for missing this roster for, a slight groin problem. I mean, I think that if Haji Wright is healthy, maybe you're looking at Pepe or Patrick Ajiman being the guy maybe left off this time around. I definitely think Haji Wright would have been in there just because his production has increased for Coventry City this new year. And then too, I mean, Ricardo Pepi didn't play a whole lot with the national team in 2025. I'm pretty sure he only had one cap. I remember the Paraguay match, and he had a really good chance to score, and he didn't take it. And people were kind of wondering, is he going to fall into that Josh Sargent rut of not being able to score for the national team? So, I still think Pepe has a good chance of making it, but I think that if he doesn't walk away from this window with maybe a goal, maybe potentially even more than that, with Haji Wright coming back healthy, for Coventry, and then you have Patrick Ajiman who is getting his chance, and maybe he takes advantage of his opportunity. Ricardo Pepi could be the guy that's looking on the way out. And then I think that going to flip that. I think the guy with the most to gain is Patrick Ajiman. I think that with Wright being injured, I think that kind of forced Ajiman into the mix. I think he might have been out of this roster if Wright was healthy. He had a really good 2025 with the national team. He scored 5 goals. And then has had a really good season abroad with Derby County. I know the goals have dried up a little bit over the last few weeks, but they're in the playoff picture, and I think they're going to need him to stay healthy and hopefully get back amongst the goals. So I think, yeah, Ricardo Pepi would be the guy I think with the most to lose, and then Patrick Ajiman would be the guy with the most to gain out of this window.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment. If Patrick Ajiman, Pochettino likes him. He's liked Ajiman ever since that first January camp where he gave him a starting role and he scored a goal, and then he depended on him throughout the Gold Cup, and he's just consistently giving him opportunities over and over again, and he's playing well in the championship and he's scoring goals. And so if he comes out and has a great camp, a great window, I can definitely see him, having a lot to gain. I'm going to go with, the way I thought about this was there's 2 guys out of this roster due to injury right now, Tyler Adams and Serginho Dest, that I think are absolute locks as long as they're healthy to make the final World Cup roster. Okay. And so that means there's 2 guys in the roster that aren't going to be here at their position. There's going to be a central midfielder that's not going to be here. And then there's going to be, maybe you could argue with Serginho Dest it's not as much because there's maybe not somebody, maybe a Joe Scally, that's just in here because of Serginho Dest, even though there's really not a like for Dest, but you get the point with Serginho Dest coming back in. Either somebody on either a fullback or a wing back or somebody who plays in a wide position probably isn't going to make it. But I think the Tyler Adams one is more interesting because I don't really know who that last guy is right now. I think Tyler Adams, Tanner Tessman, and I think Christian Roldan are pretty safe. I just think that Poch likes Roldan, his leadership, his character. I don't really see him as a bubble player right now. And so that means, if I'm right, you look at the other central midfielders, you got Johnny Cardoso, Sebastian Berhalter, and Aiden Morris. And so it means one of those guys isn't going to make the World Cup roster. And I don't know what the pecking order is in Poch's mind right now. You would think Cardoso, with his elite club level and how he's playing there, would have an advantage. But if he doesn't have a good window, he's the type of player that he could actually, if he has a good window, move himself into the starting 11. But if he has a bad window, he might not even make the roster. So I just see like he has like the widest variability of like what he could gain or what he could lose, because he could go from starting 11 to not even making the roster based on his performance this window. And then I think Aiden Morris too. I think Aiden Morris, even though I like him on this roster, if Cardoso has a great window, then I think Aiden Morris if he doesn't have a good window, if he has just a so-so window, then I think he's kind of maybe on the edge. Same with Sebastian Berhalter. And so those 3 guys, I'm really going to be keeping a close eye on this window. I think they have a lot on the line. in terms of like how they perform and whether that could lead to them making the roster. But there's a number of guys. Gio Reyna, a lot of people would say, has a lot on the line. Joe Scally has a lot on the line as well. So there's so many intriguing bubble positions with this roster. That's going to be exciting to watch, this window. Do you have a sense? Do you think that that's right? That maybe Cardoso, like, do you think I'm rating Roldan too high? Do you think he's right? Do you think Cardoso, Roldan, Berhalter, and Aiden Morse are all neck and neck together, or do you think Roldan is kind of higher than those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all pretty neck and neck. I mean, I know Roldan seems to be Pochettino likes him. I know last fall he had a couple good performances. Seems kind of like can do really whatever the team asks of him, and doesn't really get a lot of the notoriety, but just puts in good shifts when he's out there on the field. So I think maybe Roldan has a little leg up just because his veteran, he's kind of got that veteran experience to him, unlike the rest of them. But I think the rest, they're all kind of fighting in the mix. If I had to pick, one guy out of those four that maybe if one of them had to go, I would say maybe it's tough. Maybe Berhalter. But I think it's hard to leave him out because just his, set piece ability and his corner kick ability and his, service has been, really good in past matches for the national team. And I think you need that. So, yeah, it's going to be really tough. It's going to be really tough. And obviously, hopefully all these guys can stay healthy because I think that'll be, one of the deciding factors. If they all stay healthy, then that decision for Poch is going to be a little bit tougher. So,
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, well, let's talk about the two opponents. Belgium and Portugal, obviously two top tier opponents. What do you think is important for fans to know about, these two opponents for the U.S. this window?
Well, the most important thing is Cristiano Ronaldo will not be there. I know, I'm sure a lot of people probably booked their tickets to go down to Atlanta to see Cristiano Ronaldo in that second match, and unfortunately, he will not be there due to injury. But yeah, I think it's still going to be really two really good opponents, right? Portugal ranked number 6 in the world, Belgium ranked number 9. So this is two really good teams. I think with Belgium, right? I mean, they still have key players. You still have, Kevin De Bruyne and Romelu Lukaku, two guys that have been with the national team for a very long time. 7 players with 40 caps or more. Thibaut Courtois will not be there, but they have experienced, goalkeeping with Matt Sells, playing week in and week out in the Premier League. They have defenders who are well known in Thomas Meunier, Timothy Castagna, who's at Fulham with Anthony Robinson. Leandro Trossard sounds like he will not be in camp due to his own injury, which maybe kind of heavies the load on Jeremy Doku. But yeah, I think Belgium's going to be a tough test. They're maybe not the Belgium of before in terms of the amount of goal scoring options they have, but they're still a really, well drilled unit. And then when you look at Portugal, Ronaldo won't be there, but you still have, 6 players with 40 caps or more. Bruno Fernandes is key. He's having a great year for Manchester United. Really kind of pulls the strings and everything he does. You have guys like Joao Felix and Pedro Neto, Rafael Leao, who, bring a lot of dynamic and,
I think Liao. I read today that Liao might be out. I think he's out
Oh, okay.
due
Yeah.
to injury. I don't know if that's officially been announced. I was looking for that, so he might not be there. Just FYI, he was initially named to the roster.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, even if he's not there, right, you still have Joao Felix, you have Pedro Neto, you have a lot of guys in attack that are maybe trying to, stamp their spot and being a key for this team going forward. Because we know, if Cristiano Ronaldo leads this attack when he's healthy, and it doesn't really matter how old he is at this point, he still scores goals. But there's other guys that want to be in the mix. So I think it'll be an important window for both of these teams as well to, you know, pad in their roster spots and get these guys, locked in for the World Cup. So I think it's going to be two really good matches. And I'm excited to see if the U.S. can kind of rise up to that challenge that Belgium and Portugal present.
Yeah, Bernardo Silva also won't be there
Yep.
for Portugal, so another top player there is not going to be there. But yeah, these are two top sides. I mean, I always do like to kind of look at the rankings. You mentioned the FIFA rankings for Belgium and Portugal. Portugal is number 6. For reference, the U.S. is number 15. I also like to look at the ELO ratings because I find those to be a little bit more, I don't know, updated, present day than the FIFA rankings. And so for the ELO ratings, Portugal is 7, US is down to 34. And so, you know, no matter how you look at the rankings for Portugal, I mean, they're a top 10 team in the world, almost a top 5 team in the world, elite team. They won the 2025 UEFA Nations League. They beat Spain in the final. They lost in the quarterfinals of the 2024 Euros to France on penalties. Lost in the quarterfinals of the 2022 World Cup to Morocco. So, I mean, they're a team that's always knocking on the door, and they're also, winning some trophies at times. And so that's going to be just top match. Belgium, their rankings surprised me a little bit because, again, US is 15 in FIFA, Belgium is 9. But when you look at the ELO ratings, the ELO only has Belgium at 21, which is actually one behind Mexico. So according to the ELO ratings, Mexico is ranked higher than Belgium, which really surprised me. And I was kind of curious as to why. So I started looking into it, and I guess it's just their most recent results in major competitions just haven't been that impressive. They did win their World Cup qualifying group, but barely. And it wasn't a super strong group. They were in with Wales, North Macedonia, Kazakhstan, Liechtenstein. I think they ended up winning their group by like 2 points over Wales. At the 2024 Euros, they got second in their group, and then they lost in the round of 16 to France. They, of course, got bounced in the group stage of the 2022 World Cup. And so I think you said that this isn't maybe the Belgium of old that we were used to, maybe 5-10 years ago. And so I do think the U.S. has a real legit chance of going neck to neck with them and beating this Belgium team. And another thing that's interesting is that when you kind of try and play out the World Cup draw this year and the groups and where the U.S. could go and who they could play, if it all plays out as everyone thinks, I believe the U.S. could face Belgium in the round of 16, or something like that. And there's lots of things that need to happen, for that to happen. But this could be a preview, for a potential knockout round game, in the World Cup for the U.S. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited to see how they can do against these two top opponents. Okay, last question for you, Larry. Once this window is done, you're looking back on these two matches. What does a successful window look like to you? What will a successful window look like to you for this U.S. team?
I think the most important thing, first and foremost, is that everyone gets through this window injury free. Because obviously, we want this team to win and we want to see good performances, but we want to have everyone available come the summer, and so that's where Pochettino and his decision making is going to be key. And who gets the most minutes, who gets the starts, who comes off the bench. Obviously a lot of these guys have logged a lot of minutes over the club season, and we still have about 2 months to go. So, yeah, I think that's the most successful thing to me is looking and trying to get these guys healthy, but also, it would be good to see some results. Whether it's a win and a draw, if it's two wins, if it's two draws. I know they had that unbeaten run to end 2025 against some good teams, so it'd be great to see them carry this over into, two of the tougher opponents that they've seen in the last couple years. So I think that's the most important thing for me is obviously keeping everyone fit and healthy, and then picking up some results along the way. I think if they lose both of these, I don't know if there'll be tons of worry given the fact that where these are in the FIFA rankings, and maybe the quality differences between the two teams. But I think if they get thumped like they did against Switzerland, where they lost, was it 4-0, and if you lose both like 3-0, 4-0, then you kind of start scratching your head and thinking, is this team as good as we think they are? So I think that's the big thing for me is, player fitness, no injuries, but then obviously, trying to get some results along the way, and showing that this team can compete with some of the best in the world.
Yeah, they're on a 5-match unbeaten streak. And that's the most important thing for me, is that they keep that unbeaten streak going. If they keep that unbeaten streak going, which I know it's going to be hard against two opponents like this, then that'll be a successful window for me. And if they don't, it won't be successful, because I'm just all about building momentum. I know a lot of times these friendlies don't matter, and you see a team do poor in friendlies and they go to the World Cup and do great. But I just think for this team, having some positive momentum heading into the World Cup is so important. And they're coming off their biggest momentum, like gaining win against Uruguay. I just want to see them like continue that. And if they can go unbeaten against teams like Portugal and Belgium, get that streak up to 7, I just think that the vibes, the momentum, everything's going to be heading in just such a great direction, that I'll feel good about when this team convenes for those final two pre-World Cup friendlies in May. What is that? End of May, beginning of June. So that's what I'm watching. It's going to be exciting, Larry. It's going to be epic. It's going to be unbelievable. Can't wait to see it.
Yep, can't wait.
All right, man. Well, I will make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at lhenry019, also to your work at SBI Soccer. Appreciate you coming back on, and I'll see you again. You're gonna be back on one more time to recap the games next week. Look forward to that. Thanks so much for coming back on the show.
Yep, thanks a lot, Frank, for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else, thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.